and I'll begin. Hi, my name is Leah Dale, and I'm an Extension Master Gardener volunteer here in Wake County. And I'm here today to do part of our Ready Garden Grow series of classes, an introduction to gardening, vegetable gardening. And this session is session number 4, and it's about preparing your garden for planting. We all need to get ready for what we're going to do. So let's get started. So to begin with, just so you know, the Extension Master Gardeners are volunteers that work with NC State, and we're actually kind of the communication arm of NC State Extension. We go out into the community and we develop resources, printed materials. We go to gardening clinics and farmers markets, consult with gardening groups of all types, and give you guys the information that NC State has researched. So one of our mandates is to provide unbiased research-based information on gardening. And our hope is that through our information and our assistance, we help you be more successful in your gardening endeavors. So different ways that you can do that. You can follow us on Facebook. There's lots of great information there. Our hotline is actually not open right now due to the coronavirus. We are not in the office, but we welcome emails. We are answering emails. So you see that email address here on the screen, mgardner@wakegov.com, and send us any questions that you have. Pictures always help us diagnose and understand a problem or an issue better. So we invite you to do that because we'd love to help you. We love to talk about gardening. So you may or may not have done the other classes in this series, but as you see here, we have a whole slew of classes, 8 in total, and this is the 4th one, Preparing Your Garden for Planting. So if you haven't watched the preceding ones, they do build upon one another. So hopefully you'll go back and look at those and stay around and watch the rest of them as well. We also have a companion handbook that goes along with this video series. So at the end, you'll see the link on how to download that handbook. So if you're worried about taking notes and getting all the information, don't worry. You can print that out and have it as a resource to use later. So in this class about preparing your garden for planting, a couple different things that we're going to go over. We're going to first talk about the most important part of gardening, your soil. So we're going to talk about what is soil, what is compost, what's the difference? What kind of things do your plants need to grow, the nutrients, and that's coming directly out of your soil. So that's why it's so important. We also want to help you increase your soil fertility. So we're going to talk about testing and amendments. And then what are you going to grow your vegetables in? So we'll talk about some different options for gardening beds and determining what kind of soil and how much soil you're going to need to fill those beds. So let's get started here with soil. The director of the extension, part of the extension service that oversees master gardening is Dr. Gina Myers, and she is actually a soil scientist. So soil and its importance is really drilled into us here in Wake County, and we want to pass that along to you because that is the foundation of everything that you're doing. If your soil isn't any good, then you're not going to have a lot of success. So what is soil exactly? Well, it's basically composed of ground up rocks and organic material, and then air and water are also part of soil because there has to be space for both of those to work its way through, and something that not a lot of us think about when we're thinking about soil. And here in North Carolina, in this part of the Piedmont, we have a lot of clay soil, and some of you may be from areas where you're not used to clay. It can be a difficult type of soil to work with, but it's also got a lot of bonuses. But one of the main things that is a detriment, something that you need to work around, is the fact that it doesn't have a lot of organic material in it, but it does have a lot of minerals and nutrients. So we want to work with that. We want your soil to be at least 5% organic material. And we're going to talk about that in a second when we start talking about compost. And like I said, we have clay here mainly, but you have loam as a type of soil, and you have sand. And sand is, of course, going to be found more in the eastern part of our state. And your goal is to get to loam. That's the really dark, earthy soil that is actually a little bit moist. So if you were to put it in your hand and ball it up, squish it, it's going to kind of keep its shape a little bit because of that water content. So that's your goal. That's what we're working for. So how do we do that with our clay soil? How do we get to that loam? Well, it takes some work and it takes some time. But one of the first things to do is to add compost material. And compost is plain and simple the decomposed organic material that you would add in. So rotten leaves, rotten plant material, rotten grass clippings. One thing to note is fresh manure is not what you want to add into your soil. We want manure to rest and be ready after a period of time. And I can't remember exactly what those times would be. You could research that, but we're talking about plant material that has decomposed. So you want to add that in, work it into your clay soil or your sandy soil if you happen to have that. Some parts of our county do have more sand than clay. And actually, if you mix sand and clay, you know what you get? You get bricks. And that's one of the reasons that we have such a great brick and pottery industry in North Carolina, because of that combination of our two soil types. But the compost is going to build into your existing soil and make it more loamy, which is good. It's going to help you retain water. It's going to add some more nutrients into your soil, so that's a really good thing. It can help you suppress diseases within the soil. And also, when you put it on the top of your soil, you're going to help keep moisture in and keep weeds out. So that's all a good thing when we're talking about gardening. So let's talk about what vegetables need within the soil. One thing is the pH, and vegetables do best when they have a pH level between 6.2 and 6.5. And this is actually just a measure of the acidity or alkalinity in the soil. And in addition to pH, you need to be cognizant of three other key nutrients in the soil: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are noted by their chemical names, letters that notate them: N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus, and K for potassium. And you may have noticed on bags of fertilizer, commercial fertilizer that you would buy, have those letters on them for nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So how do you know how much of these you need to put in your soil and what's in there? Well, the very best way to do that is through a soil test. And here in North Carolina, we're really fortunate that our agronomics division will do free soil testing for homeowners. They also do it for commercial farmers. So during the winter months, basically from Thanksgiving to April or May, they keep their lab open mainly for those commercial farmers. So during that time, there is a nominal fee for having your soil tested. But if you do it outside of that busy period for them, for the commercial farmers, if you do it from April through the summer up until Thanksgiving, the better part of the year, all the soil testing is actually free. And we highly encourage you to do this as one of the first steps in planning your garden, because you need to know what's already in your soil before you add any amendments. Amendments are good, but they're harmful if they're done in the wrong amounts or at the wrong time. So we're going to talk about soil testing in just a minute, but the agronomics division is your friend. So there's a website for that, and we're going to talk about how to actually do the testing. So you need to get soil samples, and there are handy dandy little, my kids call them origami boxes, but they're flat when you get them, but you can fold them such that they open or make a box. And you can get as many of those as you want. Like I said, the testing is free from April through November. So if you're going to be planting different plants in different areas, you want to test those areas separately, because different plants have different nutritional needs. So as you see here in the diagram, you've got X's, and this would be a garden plot or bed. And of course, most of us don't have them in nice straight lines, but your vegetable bed probably will look something like this. And you want to take a sample from a lot of different areas, and you're going to do that with a spade or some other non-aluminum tool. You need a non-metal bucket, and you need that box that I mentioned. And you can get those from the agronomics lab or from the Master Gardener office. And I have seen them at some local nurseries, so you might be able to get one there. But if you were to call the agronomics lab, they could tell you for sure where to pick one up. And again, you probably want more than one, but you're going to have those boxes and these tools. Now, why non-aluminum? Well, if you have metal tools, that might influence the mineral content that they test out of your soil. So get something plastic. You're going to take samples from all over. Like I said, it's going to be an aggregate of the area that you're testing. Dig down 4 to 6 inches. So you want to get down below the very top layer of soil so they can get down and find out where the roots of your plants are going to be going. And put those in the bucket and swish them around, mix it all up. And you're going to put those samples into the box. And there is a line noted on the box. You need to fill that box up to that line so that they will have enough soil to test. Please don't put your soil in a plastic bag or anything like that because they're going to dump it out. It slows them down. So just put it straight into the box. And then there is a form that you fill out and attach with your boxes. And you will note on the outside of the box, you can call it anything you want. This is for you only. So you'll know that when it's veg 1, that's your first vegetable bed. If you were to have a veg 2, maybe that's your second vegetable location. If you're doing azaleas, you might call them azalea 1. Doesn't matter, but you'll match the box notation to your form notation so that when it comes back to you and the results are emailed to you, then you can match those up to the areas that you have just tested. So those boxes with the forms are going to go to the agronomics lab. That is on Reedy Creek Road or off of Reedy Creek Road. But again, that information is on their website. And then, like I said, you're going to get an email report about your results. Now, we recommend that you do these tests every 3 years so that you know how your soil is doing. And another key thing is, and we're going to go over this in the steps on how to prepare a bed for gardening, but you want to add your compost and then do your soil test, your sampling. So one thing to note that all the recommendations that they give you are going to be based on a 1,000 square foot garden. So you're going to have to do some math and adjust that to the size of your own particular area. There's lots of information again on the agronomics website, and I suggest that you contact us if you have questions about how to read your report. You also, on the back of the form, there's an area to choose the crop that you're going to be growing. If it's vegetables, that's a kind of generic listing, but if you were doing something different like blueberries, they have a different soil need and nutritional need. So there's a different code for that. So check those codes. On the back, you'll put that on your form, and then they're going to give you pH recommendations. They're going to give you recommendations for phosphorus and potassium. And then you will do the math, and we're going to go through that in just a moment to figure out what it is you need, how much you need to add to your own soil. You'll notice that I didn't mention nitrogen. Nitrogen is actually not tested in the soil report because nitrogen moves really quickly through soil. So you may test it one day and it'll be different a couple of days later. So that's not something that we're going to be able to report to you. So when you get the report, what do you do with it? Well, in a minute, we're going to talk about how to adjust some of the amendments to your own size of your vegetable garden. But if they tell you that your pH is low, you're going to need to add lime. If they tell you that your pH is high, then we recommend you add some kind of elemental sulfur. So with lime, we recommend that you use pelletized garden lime, not powder. You may have seen that in the past, people throwing it out, but that's really not an effective way to get that lime into your soil. It moves too rapidly away, as in washing away, and you just wasted a lot of money. The best time to add lime is 3 months before you plant, and sometimes this isn't, your timeline doesn't allow for this, but hopefully you're watching this in time to do that because it's going to take some time for that lime to actually move into the soil and be accessible to plants. And you want to have multiple applications if your pH is super low. So you wouldn't dump all the recommended amount of lime on your garden soil at one time. So if they recommend more than 50 pounds for 1,000 square feet, then you're going to need to apply that at multiple times. So like I said, if you have high pH, then you want to lower that by adding pine bark or elemental sulfur. And then they will give you a recommendation of fertilizer. And like I said, we're going to have to amend these or adjust them according to the size of your own garden bed. So how do we do that? Well, we got to do some math, which is not my favorite thing to do. So maybe you have someone who's gardening with you where this is their passion and their skill, their gift. It might be yours. It's not mine. But I'm going to ask somebody to help me out. So I've got a partner in crime in gardening, and he will be happy to do this kind of stuff for me. So like I said, the report comes per for 1,000 square foot of garden space, and your bed may be smaller than that. So what you're going to do is take the width and the length of your bed in square feet and multiply those two numbers together. And then you're going to multiply that by the lime per square foot. And that's going to give you the pounds of lime that's recommended. So say they're recommending 12 bags of lime. And again, this is for 1,000 square feet, but your bed is only 4 by 8. So you're going to, I forgot the first step. You got to multiply or divide your size, the amount of lime they're recommending by 1,000. So the 12 pounds comes out to 0.012 pounds of lime per square foot. And you know that your bed is 4 by 8, so that's 32 square feet in the garden. You're going to multiply that 32 by the 0.012, and it comes out to 0.384 pounds of lime. So that's about 0.4 pounds of lime that you're going to spread on your particular garden bed. So again, if you have questions about any of this and it's kind of confusing in your head and you're not quite sure, or you just want to verify your numbers, then shoot us an email and ask for clarification, and we'll be glad to help. So let's talk about actually preparing your bed for vegetable gardening. So we're assuming now that you don't have a gardening bed at all. So you're going to start by marking out the boundaries of where you're going to garden. And one of the first things you need to do is to make sure you've got enough sun. And I think that was covered in one of the earlier classes, but vegetables need at least 6 hours of full sun per day, preferably 8 hours. So wherever you're going to be making your bed, make sure that it is in full sun. You mark that out, and then you're going to need to remove all the grass and weeds, because any of the material that's left in the soil is going to compete with the roots of your vegetables, and you don't want that to happen. You're going to loosen the bed, the soil there, and it's easiest done with a shovel or a pickaxe. This is labor intensive, but it's got to be done. Then you're going to add the compost, and we talked about that earlier. Go ahead and mix that in with your soil, and then do your soil samples. Soil tests, and soil tests. We recommend that every 3 years, like I said earlier, but I can't stress that enough, that is the very first step before you plant anything. And the turnaround time on soil tests is pretty quick. It's probably going to be within a week, 2 at the very, very most. So you'll have that and you'll know what to amend, but please don't add any amendments until you've gotten those soil test results. So then you'd add those amendments and work them in, maybe lime, maybe sulfur, and fertilizer. So one of the easiest and most, well, not easiest necessarily, but the most cost-effective kind of gardening bed would be in the ground. You don't have to do anything special because you've got the ground right there in your yard. And it might take you a while to get that good loamy soil that we're talking about, but let's look at how to do that. One way is what we call double digging. And if you'll notice, there is a video there from Organic Peaceful Valley noted at the bottom on how to do this, but it's a really simple thing. You're gonna, you've got your bed here and you're starting on the left side of this diagram on the A. You're gonna take out part of that soil and put it at the other end, because you're gonna work your way from A all the way down to the end where there's no letter. Dig out part of it, add some organic material, your compost, and mix that in with the next top layer in diagram B, the top layer from the next section. And you're digging these about 12 inches across and mixing that in with the compost. And then you're going to add more compost there in that blank spot beside the first layer on B, and mix in some more compost, and then dig out, keep going down 12 inches at a time. You'll see in diagram C that in this particular bed, they've done it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So yeah, this is labor intensive, but what you've done is done a really thorough mixing of the compost with the original soil in your bed. So as you see at the end, you put in the first bit of soil that you've dug out. So it's kind of like washing your hair. Mix and repeat, mix and repeat, mix and repeat. And again, the video will show you exactly what this looks like. And this is something that you can start if you don't have the entire day to finish it. Come back and mark where you were and come back and finish it later. So another way to do some really handy dandy vegetable gardening is with raised beds. And a lot of people like these because it's a little bit neater. It's a lot easier to control weeds. Sometimes you don't have good space in a sunny area to do gardening. So a raised bed, if you see the one on the bottom left, it has wheels. So this bed could actually be moved and chase the sun perhaps. But you see, they can be really creative. You have what I consider more of a traditional bed on the top left and bottom right. But then in the middle, these are actually old troughs that are being used as a raised bed. So that's pretty creative. And then in the upper right, those are actually straw bales that are used to garden. And that's a really handy dandy way to get everything you need for your tomatoes and potatoes are often grown in, or I've seen them grown in hay bales. So you can be creative. You can use repurposed materials for your beds, like the troughs or old lumber. And let's talk a little bit about how you might construct those. Now, there's tons and tons of information on the internet about how to actually construct a raised bed. You can actually buy the entire kit from some garden supply companies. But if you'll notice at the bottom of the slide, we've got 2 particular articles, one at woodlogger.com and one by Frugal and Sustainable Gardening. So, and that one is how to make a bed that's relatively inexpensive. But some things for you to consider. You need to use rot-resistant wood, otherwise it's going to decay along, because it's an organic material, so it will decay and become compost for you, which you probably don't want to do, especially if you spend a lot of time building your bed. So use rot-resistant wood, and be careful to stay away from wood that has been treated with arsenic, and pallets are not always treated with good stuff. So there are some garden safe pallets that are marked with an HT, a DB, or a KD. Don't use the ones that are marked NB, M as in Mary, B. And Penn State has some information online about environmental soil issues if you're worried and want to read more about that. So just Google Penn State environmental soil issues and you'll find that article. And you can buy narrow boards, but you're going to have to stack those up so that they get tall enough for you to have a deep enough bed. Otherwise, you'll need to use wider boards. And we don't recommend that you line the box with any kind of weed barrier, because that's just going to add some more work. And also, you need the roots of your plants to be able to go deep enough. So this can go directly to the ground. And if you're using anything like an animal trough, an old trough, you need to make sure that there's drainage holes. Anything that you're going to use that you're repurposing, make sure there are plenty of drainage holes. Because one thing that plant roots generally do not like are wet feet, as we call it. The roots should not be in standing water or soppy soil. So if you're going to use raised beds, you want to, first of all, remove the grass and weeds and loosen the soil that's going to be underneath them. Because again, the roots of your plants are going to need to go down a lot deeper than you might imagine. You're going to build the frame over that soil that you've just loosened and gotten ready. And then you need to add soil into the box. So you can make your own. This will be a kind of labor intensive, but maybe a less expensive way to do it. But you'd add a third topsoil, a third compost, and then we recommend a third of soilless amendments such as permatil. And permatil is actually a kind of volcanic rock that is used in gardening a lot. It's a great barrier for moles and voles. So a lot of people work that into their ornamental beds as well. But it's a great way to keep the air circulation throughout your soil, which is really important. You don't want your soil to become compacted because compacted soil is not good for root growth. It's also a good way to keep moisture in the soil. So it's a handy dandy amendment to use. You can also purchase soil from a nursery and then add more compost, or if you want to, you can use bagged soil that is made specifically for raised beds, but this is probably going to be one of the more expensive options. But it's easy because you do the calculations about how much soil you're going to need, you buy the bags, and you're done. So we're going to talk about how much soil you're going to need in just a minute. But again, like I said earlier, we want to do soil testing. So once you've added the compost into whatever kind of soil you're using from these options, then you need to have it tested. Even if you bought brand new soil that's supposed to be good, let's verify that before you actually start planting. So you test and then add amendments. So how much soil are you going to need? Oh, well, here comes the math part of gardening again. So you need to know how big your bed is. So you're going to take the width and the length and the depth of your bed and multiply those three numbers together, and you're going to find out the cubic feet that you need. And then you're going to divide that by 27 because that's going to tell you how many cubic yards you need. And then if you're buying it in dry quartz, then you need to do another calculation, multiply it by 25.7. So say you've got a 4x8 raised bed, and that is a very common dimension of a raised bed because that gives you enough room to get into the middle of the bed from either side and lengthwise to grow a fairly substantial amount of vegetables in a 4x8 bed. So we've got a 4x8 bed. How are we going to figure out how much soil? So it's also, this particular bed is 8.5 feet deep. So we multiply those three together and we come up with 21.3 cubic feet. And then we divide that by the cubic yards and we get 0.8. If you need 3 inches of compost to add to a bed, then you'd multiply the dimensions of the bed times the 3.5 and come out with 10 cubic feet of compost. Again, if you have questions about how to calculate this, if you're not quite sure and you want to verify the numbers before you make the investment of soil, go ahead and contact the Master Gardener office and we'll be glad to help you. Don't ask for me because, like I said, math is not one of my gifts. So this gets you ready to start planting. So we talked about the difference between soil and compost. We talked about the nutrients that the vegetables are going to need, the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and the pH. We talked about how to determine your soil fertility and how to improve it. So I hope you know the answer to that. It's soil testing, and please do it and listen to the recommendations. And remember, when the soil test comes back and they've recommended a particular amount of phosphorus or potassium or something to amend your pH level, don't think that if that number is good, a little bit more is better. These are scientifically determined numbers, so please go by those and not what you think you know or what somebody told you. Go by the soil lab. They know what they're talking about. And then the last thing we talked about was how to build a garden bed and determine how much soil. So the next class up is going to be planting and harvesting. I hope you enjoy that because that's why we're doing this, to actually get some vegetables. Very exciting. So again, if you have questions, call us, jot this number down. At the taping here, we are not in the office, but we will be soon, hopefully sooner than later, or email us at mgardner@wakegov.com. Here is the link for the Ready Garden Grow Handbook that I mentioned earlier. All the information from all of these classes is in this handbook, so I highly recommend that you download it and have it for reference printed out if you're able to. And everything that we've talked about is there, because if you're like me, you've heard it, it sounds great, but when it comes to remembering specifics, I need to see it in writing. We also have another amazing resource, our Extension Master Gardener Handbook. And this is now available for public use. So you can download a copy of that. And so every topic that you might have a question about, whether it be soil or pruning or lawns or vegetable gardenings, a little bit of everything, we have that in our Extension Master Gardener Handbook. It's got beautiful pictures, lots of great references and links. So I highly recommend that you get that as well. So the next topic is going to be harvesting your plants, your vegetable crops. So have fun with that. Thanks for spending some time with me. Bye.